Hello, hello. Welcome to the YouTube channel and live stream with Jesse Johnson. I'm super excited to be here. Today we are examining the messages in classic movies, partly to bring some joy, relief, pleasure to your day, partly to remind you of how available the entire world is for opportunities to go deeper. There is nothing that doesn't fit into this category. And I'm going to prove it to you today as we look at a scene from Hook, one of my childhood favorites. This movie is a story of Peter Pan as an adult. It's like the fantasy of what happened when Peter Pan went back to the regular world, grew up, got married, had kids of his own, started working in, I believe, a bank. And by a series of events that we won't need to go into, ends up back in Neverland as like a middle-aged guy who has very little, if any, memory of what it was like to be a child, to be Peter Pan. So it's a really sweet movie. Highly recommend it if you haven't seen it recently. And we're just going to look at one scene because when we go narrow, we can go really, really deep. So we could do this for probably every minute of the entire movie. We're going to choose this particular minute, and it's about halfway through. So before we dive into actually looking at the scene, just take a moment and remember what it was like to be a child. And in particular, the things that were growthful for you about being a child, the things that felt good. We all had all kinds of trauma as children too. For the purpose of this moment, this exercise, think about the pieces of childhood that were really free for you. You can go back as far as you want. For some of us, it's like all the way to infancy, right? When we came out of the womb, we came out screaming. We came out relentless. We came out demanding and unapologetic. As infants, we were completely unconcerned with the trappings of the material world, completely unconcerned with what made others comfortable, completely unaware, blissfully unaware of people-pleasing, of codependency, right? We learned all that stuff. We didn't even have that much fear as infants, right? So see if you can remember that or imagine that you can remember that. Feel that freedom in your body. Feel that independence. And then let yourself hold that almost like you're holding a child version of yourself, like the infant version of yourself, and come back into your body. Welcome, Dorte. Welcome, Erica. Come back into your body as the adult version of you. Welcome, Rochelle. Welcome, Chloe. If I haven't said your name yet, you can just imagine that I'm saying your name. You're coming in as the adult version. And notice the gap. Notice the difference. Again, lots of things we could pay attention to. Specifically here, notice where you feel a little less free, a little less relentless, a little less unapologetic. And just notice, there's nothing wrong with the change. You're just observing the change that has happened. I just saw a comment come in from Rihanna. Brilliant, brilliant comment. I think this is actually the purpose of the film. To remind us who we really are. Not that we regress, right? Not that we become children again, but that the essence of who we are that we knew as children, we bring back as adults. We rediscover that essence and find a way to let it come through from here. So as we look at this scene, see if you can let both parts of you watch. The littlest one, the freest one, that first one, the first version of you, as well as this adult version of you. And let's see where we go. All right, Shri, let's dive in. Give us a little screen. So this scene is happening after we're halfway through the movie, and Peter Pan has had a hard day and is now coming for dinner. And he's super pumped. He's really excited. Let me turn on some subtitles for you. And you can look at him. He's just freaking out, like the smells. He's like, yeah, give it to me. Oh.
Why do you have them?
And then the kids, I love this part. Like, he's surrounded by kids. Okay, this is an important feature. He would not be remembering the truth of this part of himself if he wasn't giving himself the immersion. So I want to really emphasize this. This is not about spending a bunch of time with kids, although that's a beautiful thing to do also. That's not the only way to do it. The opportunity is to think about who you're immersing yourself with. Who is the community that you're surrounding yourself with? If part of your objective is to remember this essential part of who you are, you need to spend time with people, put yourself in environments where that's going to be reflected back to you. And that can be really challenging in the workplace. It can be really challenging in the family. It can be really challenging in communities that have known you for a long time. Because with no malintent at all, they just reflect back to you who you've been. They reflect back to you who they've known you as. This is normal, right? We're pattern-seeking machines, so we reflect back the patterns that we've seen. And if you're going through any kind of transformation, you will be challenged when those around you reflect back to you something old. And get ready for the biggest pun of today. It will offer you a hook to latch onto and go back into the old pattern. So really think about this. If Pan was not literally in another world, completely separated from his adult life, family, lifestyle, friends, neighbors, all that stuff, he would never be doing this. He would never be going deep in this way. A huge part of what's been hard for him in this day is that he doesn't have access to any of those familiar things. So he's kind of going through the purification process of having to remember his body and be challenged to do these things that used to be really easy for him as a young thing and are now, as a middle-aged man, not so easy. So he comes to the table and his little friend across the way says, no, we don't use utensils here. That's not what we do here. So think for yourself in a moment, like imagine that you in this moment are teleported into an immersive environment that directly supports you stepping into the truest, most undiluted, liberated version of yourself. How would they interact with you? How would they challenge you? What would happen in that environment that would poke at you? That would get under your skin sometimes, but at the same time, like lead you in the direction of what you're going for. Welcome, Kristen, Tamar, Yvonne. So nice to be here with you guys. All right, Shri, let's keep going. So study Peter's logical brain. I loved that part. We have them so we don't use them. Surplus, abundance. This is like the freedom of childhood. We like to have things that we don't need. It shows us how much there is. playful debate. And you see Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell is kind of a bridge character in this movie. She's not of the children. She's not of the London world. She's of Neverland. And she is really the guru, the guide. She's very playful. She's like giggling as she watches all this go down, as she watches Peter's discomfort. And so you can all, I know a lot of you guys here are guides, mentors, coaches, people who facilitate transformation. You can study Tinkerbell's character in this movie as a model for your own behavior, right? So what uncomfortable situations are you throwing your clients into? And how much are you letting yourself giggle as you watch them kind of struggle in the name of their transformation? If you haven't seen this movie, this is Rufio. He's kind of like the new Pan, the new leader. So he's got some frustration that...
Everybody say grace.
Bless this, O Lord.
Grace! That Robin Hood is back. Oh, not Robin Hood, Peter Pan. So here's where the scene really gets fun, right? So what's happening right now? There's no food. All my favorite never foods. And the kids are all describing it. This is the world they live in. They're like, yeah, this is fucking real shit, bro. This is how we do it. It tastes so good. And Peter's like, what? Why don't I have access to this? Wait, what's happening? This is a powerful moment. This is where he hits his own cognitive dissonance. This is one of the most pivotal scenes in the movie. You'll see as we go. This is a very high contrast moment for Peter. He is faced with the discomfort of not yet lining up with the true version of himself. He's got one foot in one world and one foot in another. And I'm telling you right now, that's indecision at its worst. Like, that's what it looks like. It's inevitable. We all go through those periods in transition and transformation times, but it's the most painful. Not the being in the old world, not the being in the new world, the having one foot in both. Very, very uncomfortable. So this is another thing you can look at. Where in your life do you have one foot in one world and one foot in another, and you're not letting yourself go all the way in? Whenever that happens, it's like you've got your feet on two different trucks, right? Like playing chicken, right? Two trucks driving side by side down the road. You're standing in the middle of them. Eventually, you're going to have to choose. You're going to have to choose which truck to fall into. Some of you guys have heard me tell this story. This is a Footloose reference. So you're going to have to choose eventually. It's dangerous. This is a dangerous situation. And if you do this in your business, it is dangerous. In other words, if you say, I'm going to start my business, I'm going to build it to 7 figures, I'm going to help all these people, I'm going to be a huge author, influencer, speaker, celebrity in this space, and then you're hiding, that is dangerous for you, dangerous for your business. And I'm not trying to be threatening. I'm just trying to be really, really clear about what the stakes are. It is more dangerous for you to be in that state than it is for you to be in your old state of conditioned illusion. So you have to go through these bridge states. You have to have one foot in one world and one foot in the other for at least an instant. But you don't have to do it for longer than that. But most people stay in this state because they're not ready yet to jump. They're not ready yet to choose. And so they'd like to tell the story that they're in the transformation, but this is not really transformational space. What's happening right now, you can see he's suffering. So the contrast is about to get cranked up, and that is so he will choose. The contrast gets turned up so we will choose. The contrast gets turned up when we have one foot in two different worlds. This is what's happening right now as the conversation around systemic racism rises to the surface of mainstream conversation. The contrast is turning up because we have got to choose. It's time. It's become too dangerous to stay in this place of indecision and illusion. So just looking at your comments for a second. Welcome, Robert. Yes. Dorte says it's hard to make this a conscious step, and that's true. That's a real challenge. It's why contrast is there. So let's keep watching. Let's study how this plays out. So these kids are just hamming it up, and Peter is just suffering. Oh, he's so hungry. He just wants, oh, it looks so good. The kids are so, look at this cutie. God, he's so cute. Oh, the suffering. He's so hungry. He's so hungry. And this is one of those places, like, we're polite to each other in society in general. This is a deeper conversation, but there is this cultural value of politeness to avoid doing to each other what these kids are doing to Peter. We unconsciously, for the most part, conspire to reduce contrast, to make people feel more comfortable. So when you step into your identity, your leadership as a spiritual teacher, as a healer, as a transformational coach, you are battling this cultural value system, which has you softening things like, it's not that good. I know you can't see the food. I'm eating it, but it's not that good. Or I'll just like pretend that I'm not eating it. I'll like eat it on the side to make it more comfortable for you, Peter. When actually it is the contrast that's about to crank up the urgency to change, which is what Peter needs. So these kids are modeling what you as guides need to model, which is to turn up the volume on your own unapologetic contrast contribution. That you're like, yeah, this shit is good. Wealth, freedom, ease, this shit is good. Get your ass over here. They are not toning it down for him. They are
Are you eating?
Tank is the same.
No, please.
Even make it worse. They make it more intense.
What's the deal? What's the real food?
This is the question.
Stop being Peter Pan. You won't be Peter Pan, so eat up.
If you can't, let's look at that again.
Please.
She's like, just do it.
What's the real food?
He's like, but I can't.
You can't imagine yourself
If you
being
can't
Peter Pan,
imagine
you won't be
yourself being Peter
so eat
Pan,
up.
you won't be Peter Pan. If you cannot imagine yourself as the future version of yourself, empowered, free, wealthy, impactful, devotional, liberated, orgasming every day in the way that you want to, living in the relationships that you want to, having the home and community that you want to, serving in the world the way you want to, making money the way you want to. If you can't imagine yourself doing and being that person, there's no chance of you doing it. That's the putting one foot on the other world. Like, you got to be able to imagine it. And then when you start to act from that imagination, that's how you get your other foot in that world. You act in alignment with that truth. And it's simple. There's not a lot of explanation to do here. There's not a lot to talk about. Eat.
What? There's nothing here. Gandhi ate more than this.
Don't you remember this used to be your favorite game?
So
Get the game.
what I like about this scene, this part, is watching him fight. Right? So once again, we talked about this last week with Empire Strikes Back and Luke. We're watching it again. He sees it. He's got one foot on one side, one foot on the other. There he is. He's sitting at the table. He hasn't said, fuck it, I'm done with this. But he's fighting right now for the truth that there's no real food. His energy is going into arguing for that. There's no real food. This isn't real. Why are you asking me to participate in this fucking game? This is stupid. He's never going to get there from there. And so she's trying, like, remember? This used to be your favorite game. This is your fucking idea. That's really juicy. That's part of what I love about the message of this movie. that all the things that make you uncomfortable, all the things that you're reaching for that feel just out of grasp, the truth is they're what you came in with. You were born with this knowing. You were born with this capacity. This is not new. You're rediscovering it. You're tapping into it. You're integrating it as an adult, which is this is a big deal. It's a different thing for a middle-aged man to be able to fly than for a kid to be able to fly. Like, just feel the energetics of that. This is a big deal.
I want some real food.
I want some real food. Fuck what you're asking me to do. This is his resistance. We all do this.
You know that?
And what happens? So now we've got Rufio entering the scene. Rufio is again, this sort of new Peter Pan figure. He's been leading the Lost Boys while Peter has been growing up in London. And this turns up the contrast. This conflict that's ensuing is turning up the contrast.
Come on, you can do better than that.
Can't believe you're encouraging.
Yeah,
And everyone is encouraging it.
You paunchy sag bottom puke pot.
Rufio is calling Peter out on the truth.
You know that?
And so are the Lost Boys. The Lost Boys are like, not a good one, Peter. No.
Hemorrhoidal suck navel.
Well, maybe a 5th grade reading.
So
Boil dripping, beef fart sniffing, bub.
I mean, there's a lot of play in this, but I want you to feel into the possibility that actually when this contrast happens, when feedback comes to you and it doesn't feel good, it's because there's a piece of truth in it that you're meant to claim. Like, oh yeah, I am being a boil dripping, beef fart sniffing bubble butt. Yep, I am.
Bubble butt.
That's true. That's true. And let it come, and then turn up the volume on your willingness to fight for who you are. Who you are.
Pimple squeezing finger bandage. A week old.
Look at his face. He's just like feeling beat up still. He's still feeling done to. He hasn't yet made the shift. He's like, oh, this is he's still got one foot on both sides. In fact, the truth is that this contrast, this is important. Everybody listen into this. The contrast increases our likelihood of making a choice in either direction. That's the risk. As Rufio attacks Peter, Peter is considering, like, fuck this, I'm going home. And by the way, the whole reason he's there is because Hook has stolen his kids. We'll come back to Hook in a little bit. So he's like, it's not like he's just there for fun and games. He's there to rescue his kids. He's the only way that he's going to be able to save his kids. But watch him right now. He's considering going home. That's what that face is. He's like, this is hard. This is not working. I'm done.
Burger with everything on it and flies on the side.
Substitute chemistry teacher.
And that's the moment when it changes. And my proposition to you guys is that that's why. Because he felt himself shift from that like pretty equilibrium state of like, I got one foot here and one foot here. I'm like physically here, but I'm not really into it. And then he was like, I got to go home. Like you could see it emotionally on his face. Like I'm done. I'm out. And because of that and the consequence he knows exists if he goes back, he turned up the volume and got both feet on this fucking side and stands up and starts actually playing the game.
Come on, Rufio, hit him back.
Oh, if we think of Rufio as a metaphor for the subconscious, that's all Peter had to do was stand up, choose sides. That's it. And the subconscious is like, what? How do I handle this?
Long tongue.
I guess I can keep playing.
Prison barber.
Mother lover.
Nearsighted gynecologist.
And then he tries.
Camel cake.
In your rear, cow derriere.
Lion crying, spine, prine, ultra pig.
But he knows he's lost. He already knows he's lost. Subconscious is done. He's like, oh no. And Peter can feel that.
Stupid
Yep.
Rufio, if I'm a maggot burger, why don't you just eat me?
Yeah, there we go.
Two-tone, zebra-headed, slime-coated.
This is the energy you guys need. This is what it looks like to fight for your vision, to fight for yourself, to fight for what's wanted, to fight for what God is streaming through you, the vision that's coming through you that can only come through you. You've got to be willing to get on both of your feet and fight for it.
Pimple farming, paramecium brain, munching on your own mucus, suffering from Peter Pan envy.
Call the same truth back.
I'll tell you what a paramecium is. That's a paramecium. It's a one-celled critter with no brain.
Can't
that
fly.
Don't mess
Subconscious
with me, man.
can't fly.
I'm a lawyer.
And I love that last line because he brings in his adulthood, right? He's not just he is kind of regressing. He's playing this like food fighting, word fighting war with the child. So he is regressing in that way, but then he's also like claiming what he's learned. He's like, oh, I fucking know how to play this game. And not only that, but I know how to play the game better than I used to. This is important because as we grow, it's very easy. Like throughout the story, up until this half, like we're at halfway through. An hour and 15 minutes in, there's an hour and 5 minutes left. This is the turning point where not only does he get both feet on the side of possibility, on the side of Neverland, on the side of integration, but he brings his adult self there. In doing that, he brings all parts of him to the table. It's not that he's just going back to childhood and leaving his adulthood behind. He's bringing his adulthood in to the liberation, freedom, clarity, power, flight of that childhood space. They're saying panny, not banning, and subconscious is just done. He's like, I can fight, but I'm going to fail. This isn't working. And then get ready, guys. This is the moment.
Oh, Rufio, why don't you just go suck on a dead dog?
So this is key. This is key because what shifted? He sat down, but not from a place of giving up. He sat down because he was like, I got this now. I don't need to stand up and fight because I'm in my authority. I'm in my ownership. I know who I am. He doesn't have to be so aggressive. He doesn't have to keep poking at Rufio. He can now play. And that's the key in this moment. So he sits down and he's like, I'm just playing right now. But you can feel in his energy, there's no cognitive dissonance anymore. He's got those 2 feet here. He's like, I'm in it. I'm in it to win it. Let's do this. And through contrast, through the fight with Rufio, through being ridiculed, humiliated, publicly chastised, that's what gave him the urgency to use his imagination. And this is his awakening.
Doing what?
And I love
Peter.
this scene. I say this to my clients all the time. Like, this is the scene that the emotional content of this scene, when they say you're doing it. This is it. This is it. This small thing. He's like, doesn't really fully know what's happening right now. He's amazed himself. He could, in this moment, he's vulnerable to just being like, well, this isn't, I don't know what just happened. Like, and then immediately popping himself back into the two feet in two worlds paradigm. But the voices of those he's immersed with, remember that from the beginning. The voices that surround you when you have a big breakthrough matter. They tell you the truth of what's happening. If right now, if Peter was surrounded by his London family, they would all say, I don't know what you just did, but that's crazy. Stop throwing food. Like, whatever you just did, you hid some like Play-Doh in your pocket. Stop doing that, Peter. That's ridiculous. They would have judged him. They wouldn't have believed it. They would have discounted it. And he would then have regressed back into the old consciousness. But instead, he's surrounded by the voices of truth, the voices that can amplify the truth of what he's doing. And what do they say?
You're doing it.
You're doing it.
Doing what?
You're doing it. You're using your imagination, Peter. This is the power of imagination, my friends. Look at what he's doing now. A full motherfucking feast. Anything you could possibly want. All kinds of desserts and crazy nonsense. This is direct truth. This is not metaphor. This is how it works. This is how conscious creation works.
You're playing with us.
And what's the key? Play. You're playing with us. You're doing it. You're playing with us. Who's the us? Who are the lost boys in your life? There may be some people, but it's also God, your guides, your spirits, the angels, the fairies, whatever language you give to the universal energetic community that is around you all the time. You are getting this feedback from them all the time. You know it in your heart. You know it because of how you feel. We could go further, but let's pause there. Thanks so much, Shri. I recommend, if you have not watched this movie recently, watch it. It's on a few different platforms. This was on Amazon Prime, so you can rent it there. Watch the movie again. And as you're watching it, like, have fun, but as you're watching it, treat this like study. Have a notebook and pen with you while you're watching it and write down the metaphors that show up for you. Who is the hook in your life? Who is your Tinkerbell? Who is your Rufio? Where are the moments in your life where you know you're doing it? Like, look for the things that trigger you. Look for the things that activate you. Look for the things that catalyze you. Look for the pieces that remind you of truth. Treat it like scripture, like very entertaining scripture. When I say that, I don't mean to say that like whoever wrote Hook is necessarily writing something as sacred as the Bhagavad Gita. And at the same time, I guess I kind of am. It's like, yeah, this is the human thing. This is what we're here to do. So in a way, every movie, every book, every story is about this same story. You can find the thread of this transformational message everywhere. So immediately, whether you watch the film or not, you are primed just from this conversation today to look at the truth of your own double world experience right now. Because anytime we're growing, this is true. So don't take this in a negative way. It's not negative. It's a beautiful thing when you have a new world that you're stepping into. What is that new world that you're stepping into? What's the old world that you're stepping out of? What's the risk of going all into the new world? And what's the consequence of falling back into the old one? Like, let yourself look at that. Let yourself look at the truth of the choice that's in front of you. That's exercise 1. Exercise 2 is both reflectively, like by looking at your past, and also proactively by anticipating your future. What are the moments of contrast that will tempt you to stop and go back to the old world paradigm? And how can you reframe them? Like, how can you look at them as, instead of excuses to stop, the catalyst, the key that unlocks your capacity to choose the new paradigm? Again, going back to Dorte's comment, I think it is hard to make this a conscious step to get both feet into the new territory. And that's true. How do we get there? Through those moments of contrast. They can be very brief, by the way. This is not like, doesn't have to be years of suffering. I pray that it's not. And sometimes it is. So right, the opportunity is to wake up in it now. How can you use this moment right here, right now, to wake up, crank up the truth that you're willing to see about yourself in these contrast moments and use it to step into the new paradigm? This is very relevant on an individual level. And I will also say this is relevant on a societal level. Right now, the contrast is cranked up. We are seeing the truth, right? If you think about Peter back in London being a banker, he's not thinking about what's happening in Neverland. He's not thinking about the Lost Boys. In fact, he doesn't even remember they exist. That's how disconnected he is. That's a good description of most people of privilege living in America and the West. That's a good description. No judgment. That's just the level of consciousness that most people were living in even a week ago. Many, many, many things happen. There's many dominoes. George Floyd's death was a huge catalyst for turning up the contrast. And suddenly, everyone, in a way that I've never seen before, is looking at the truth of systemic racism in our countries, in our societies. And it's painful. It is not fun to look at. It doesn't feel good. In the same way that Rufio attacking Peter doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good when you're like, I'm a 45-year-old man, I'm a banker, and I'm feeling attacked by a freaking 13-year-old. What the hell? Why do I feel so lousy? Because he's speaking truth to power. That's why. He sees something and he's saying it. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't make it wrong. And we have the opportunity individually and collectively to step up like Peter, not to defend our unconsciousness, but to claim our power. Right? The whole point of the conflict with Rufio is not to prove Rufio wrong. It's to find Peter's power. Power to imagine a new world, power to imagine a new paradigm. And once he's imagined it, boom, ready to create it. Our subconscious is not the enemy. Rufio is not the enemy. We, each other in general, are not the enemy. But the fighting that's coming through, the willingness to stand up for more, that's worth it. And the contrast makes that fight come through. It calls that fight forth. And then remember what happens when we're done with the fight. That's actually, we're not going to look at it, but just a little plant the seed. What happens after the feast, like in the next 2 minutes or so of that scene, is that they begin this enormous food fight. It's hilarious. So they're fighting, but it's not coming from aggression. It's coming from joy. It's coming from fun. It's coming from a willingness to be messy, a willingness to play with each other. Let's play together. Oh, look, now we're working with our imagination. Oh, look, now we're consciously creating. Oh, look, now we can connect on a different level. Why? Because Peter, now you're in Neverland. Now you remember who you are. Now we can talk. White people, now you're recognizing you got some racist tendencies. Great, now we can talk about systemic racism. We can't talk about it until you're willing to look at that. Good? Clear? Any questions? Really, really beautiful work, guys. Really, really beautiful. I love your comments. I love the fun we're having together. Let's keep doing it. Tomorrow, we're having open forum, hour of insight. Any questions that you've got, bring them. Bring your questions, my queens and kings. Let's dive in. Then Friday night, Shri and I are going to be interviewing the incredible Felicity Janine, Indigenous woman with tons of insight into systemic oppression and what it means to actually change culture. I'm super excited for that interview. And then next week, we're going to have 2 more interviews, another analysis of a fun movie, and more hours of insight. So keep coming. Let us know how we can serve. Let us know how we can help. If you're not already subscribed to the email list for Jessie Johnson Coaching, do that. If you're not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, do that. If you're not already following us on Instagram and Facebook, do that. We're everywhere. Come find us. I love you all. Enjoy your freedom. Enjoy your joy. Enjoy your play. Enjoy Neverland.